feel like I know most of you now. My name is Dan Schrag, and I direct the Harvard University Center for the Environment, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to another of our Future of Energy events. Today, we're going to have a slightly different format. We're really delighted today to have Sunil Sinha today from the Tata Motors. Tata Companies really has been in the news in the US recently, not as one of the large Indian companies, but really for its rather incredible production of a car that costs only $2,500. The idea of a $2,500 car in many ways opens up all sorts of possibilities, both some positive impacts and some negative impacts on transportation. And what we're going to hear today from Sunil is a perspective on this transformation and the impact on the world that I think will be very interesting. First, let me tell you a little bit about him. He was recently redesignated Chief of the Group Quality Management Services for Tata Sons Limited. His former title was CEO of the Tata Quality Management Services. His career has spent more than 27 years in organizational transformation, human resources, international business, project management, many other areas. He has really helped make Tata a powerhouse in the world of international companies. He was involved in Tata in many different capacities, including General Manager of Human Resources, Corporate Quality at Tata International. He also headed the Human Resources for Sales and Marketing at Tata Steel. So he's been involved with Tata for a very long time in many different capacities. By training, he's a mechanical engineer, and he serves on boards and the audit committees of Tata Composites and a variety of other companies as well. Today we're going to hear from Sunil, and then we're going to sit down with Venki Yanamurthy, the former Dean of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and myself, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion before we bring the audience into that discussion as well, thinking about the implications. So please join me in welcoming Sunil Sinha to Harvard.
Professor Dan Schrag and friends, first of all, thank you very much for a very, very generous introduction. I was sitting there, and I thought he's talking about somebody else, not me. I would also like to introduce, I have 2-3 colleagues here. I have a colleague from Tata Technologies who brought Nano outside. Ron is here.
It's actually here.
And he is very closely associated with the innovation of Nano. I have my colleague Christabel Norona. She is Chief of Corporate Affairs at the corporate group level, Tata Sons, Christabel. And we have Raghunath Kale, who comes from Indian Hotels. Taj Boston, you know, is here. And he is Vice President of Internal Communications. So first of all, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to come here and speak to all of you. And very good evening to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be here today during this season of fall with vibrancy of color in Boston, and I can see a lot of enthusiasm and energy amongst the audience seated here in this esteemed auditorium of Harvard. I think you are the ones, the young generation who are going to define the color of our future. And the color of hope and aspiration that you hold in your hearts and minds will, I think, shape the world of tomorrow. What tomorrow holds will be defined by what we choose to do with our collective intelligence, enthusiasm, and energy. Something to create, something to nurture, and something to dream of. This current platform of future of energy, I understand, focuses on how to find secure, safe, reliable source of energy to fuel the world economic growth. And in the past, I have learned that this forum has invited many informed speakers from across the world, and perhaps mainly from the first world countries, including US, who have spoken about the trends of energy, who have spoken about the challenges ahead, and the technologies and strategies to mitigate the same. I would like to share with you some thoughts with the hope that they will ignite your minds to think about the future of energy, not only in the first world countries, but also for countries around the world. We are living in an era of internet where the gap between the first and third world countries are narrowing, and I guess each one is dependent on other for various things. We can no longer live in the isolation and ignore what's happening in the world around us. So today, I would like to touch upon the challenges being faced by third countries like India in fueling the sustainable economic growth. A large section of our society, especially in rural India, which comprises of almost 70% of 1.2 billion population of India, have difficulty in lighting up their homes. They have difficulty in cooking their meals. And if you go to rural India, and if you are carrying a cell phone, perhaps they will have difficulty in charging the cell phone, because even now, there are 450 million people who don't have access to energy, who don't have access to electricity. So, some facts I have presented here about India, and if you see this table, you will notice that we are talking about the comparative figure of population in millions, CO2 emission per capita, and energy consumption per capita for countries like India, North America, China, and Brazil. You will notice that these figures, especially per capita CO2 emission and per capita energy consumption, are very minuscule at this point of time as compared to the first world countries. If you look at the petroleum consumption, it's about 4% right now amongst 1.2 billion population is consuming 4% of world's population. Is it happening by design? Perhaps not, because you can see that even at this point of time when we are talking here, 37% of people are below poverty line in India, and the per capita income is ranked 139 in the world. But things are changing fast, very fast, and the family size is growing, and also the per capita income and affordability is growing in India. And the latest McKinsey study about the Indian urbanization has revealed that by 2030, the urban population will be 40%. The urbanization rate will be about 40%. And many cities in India, which are smaller cities today, will become bigger than many countries like Portugal, Colombia, UAE, Israel, and Chile. So what do we do? What is our response to these challenges of energy and environment? And what India has done is very clearly made a commitment that we will we are committed to the energy emission per person, and the Prime Minister of India has committed that no matter how much we grow, no matter what we do, we'll make sure that our energy consumption, carbon CO2 emission will remain less than the world average, which is around 5, 6, I don't know, around that figure right now. India has also committed that the specific carbon emission in all the businesses will reduce by 20% by 2020, and the Tata Group is also committed to do the same thing. Our stated policy is very, very clear that in all businesses that we are in, we will reduce our specific carbon emission to match the best in the world. Long way to go, but we are committed. We have a blueprint ready for that. The Government of India has national plan in place, and there are 8 national action plans which are in place, which is talking about transportation, which is talking about solar mission, and so on and so forth. And through these national missions, there are blueprints available, there are strategies available to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change. Today, given this scenario about India, the focus in India has been doing things differently, and therefore the importance of embracing innovation is very, very high. And if we have to achieve what is stated in the national policy, what is stated in various organizational policy, there is only one way we can move forward, and that is by adopting, embracing innovation in everything that we do. The context here presents us with a larger focus on innovation in all areas of businesses, including energy. And that is the topic that I would like to speak about, on how we at Tata's are promoting a culture of innovation by providing a platform for people to celebrate successes and failures. So before I go to the innovation in Tata, let me talk a little bit about Tata. And I'm sure many of you would have known there is a Tata car parked outside, and I saw a lot of interest in that Tata car, and we'll talk about that Tata car also very shortly. This group is about 140 years old, and it's today has diverse businesses in 7 sectors like material, engineering, communication, IT, services, and so on and so forth. It is one of the largest employers in private sector. We have a family size of 350,000 colleagues all over the world, and in UK itself we have a presence of about 50,000 colleagues. In US we have a presence of about 16,000 plus colleagues in US. In 2009, the group revenue was $70 billion, and almost 65% of this revenue comes from outside India. One interesting thing about the Tata Group is 66% of the group profits go for philanthropic trusts and go for activities which are long-term in nature, activities which are there to improve quality of life for people who are one of our stakeholders. If you look at the group holding structure, there is some uniqueness in the group holding structure. Tata Sons, where I work, and my company is part of Tata Sons, is the holding company of the group. And the group structure is very, very unique in many ways. First, in case of most of the conglomerates, the large conglomerates of the world, what we see is that the parent company is often the listed company, and the children, various businesses, they are unlisted. But in case of Tata's, which has about 100 odd companies and businesses, the situation is just reverse. The parent is unlisted. Tata Sons is unlisted, and there are 100 odd companies which are independent and have autonomous boards that run each of these businesses. And perhaps that is one reason why companies in Tata Group have greater appetite to take a long-term view without being greatly affected by quarter-to-quarter result, because there is no pressure from the parent to get into that quarter-to-quarter syndrome, because that's something which is always taking a long-term view. Another unique feature about the group, about the structure, is that the trusts, as I mentioned, that hold 66% in the parent company, and that is engaged in the in issues like improving quality of life. And Tata Quality Management Services, where I work, is part of the Tata Sons, and this company is responsible for facilitating excellence in all Tata companies. My company is working with all Tata companies, whether it is auto or steel or hospitality or IT or any service industry or telecom industry. We work with them. We help them to embrace some kind of excellence program. We help them to embrace the Management of Business Ethics program, MBE program. And there is one thing which is non-negotiable in all businesses, is that when any company, any business has to use Tata name, they have to sign up a commitment to run the business excellently and ethically. And that commitment is monitored year after year, and the group sees whether the company is moving on that track of running the business excellently and ethically or not. Of late, after the Enron and WorldCom and many other businesses which went through a kind of crisis, Tata Group has, which was always very committed to corporate governance, has adopted corporate governance assessment in a very formal manner. And every year, the company's boards and management system are assessed for good corporate governance practices. Safety is a big problem in emerging economies in third world countries. You know, when I come to travel in US or Europe, I see the safety mindedness is very high. People in general day-to-day life, safety is absolutely topmost in their mind. But if you go to countries like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you will see that safety is not top of the mind issue. And that was one of the reasons why you see this car Nano outside, and I'll talk about it. And safety is something which again has been taken as a group level initiative to change the mindset, to change the paradigm of people and make the whole organization very safe. Innovation is another program which my company helps other Tata companies to implement. And finally, 3 years back, we realized that we are not doing enough. And so climate change program has been taken up as a big program which is implemented in all Tata companies. And thereby, what has happened by including these elements, we have expanded the definition of quality, and the excellence program has now elements of sustainability which we expect will make Tata companies more and more sustainable. So today I'm going to talk about innovation, and You know, a little more than a decade ago, Tata Group embraced an excellence program called Tata Business Excellence Model, which is fashioned on USA's Malcolm Baldrige program, Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award program. And this Tata Business Excellence Model is popularly known as TBEM. TBEM has been in place for last 15 years, and all Tata businesses are have embraced it as the DNA of their way of running business. And this has not only made Tata companies more competitive, but it has also given a sound platform to grow, especially outside the shores of India. And after running this program for a decade, what we realized that companies which are market leaders and businesses which are globally successful, and many of them come from this geography, they have one thing in common, and that is they think, they aspire, they question, they dream, they dare, they experiment, they create, and most importantly, they innovate. And this stimulated us to look at innovation as a strategic approach to grow internationally, and we initiated a program on innovation to make all Tata companies think innovation more strategically and ensure that innovation sits in the strategy of each of these companies.
You know, for some reason in India, we all get hung up on structure before we get involved with achievement. And in many cases, I find whenever you try to say something, someone says, what about the structure? What about the organization? There is, my concern is innovation will not evolve necessarily because you create a structure. Innovation has to be part of the DNA of that organization, or somehow we have to bring out the creative strengths of our people. You don't need a structure for that. You can have an idea at 2 o'clock in the morning that wakes you out of your sleep. We need to have an environment that when you come into work and say, I had this idea and I believe it deserves some thought, that the company should not put you down. If that, somebody should be able to see the value or not, or say that there's no value, but that there should be a means of not being frustrated with that. And that doesn't mean that stupid ideas have to clutter up people's working day. I'm just trying to say that we should create a space where we can, in fact, lead and do things differently and do things that others have not done. We will not, in the long term, in a global environment, ever be leaders unless we are also innovators.
Mr. Tata's constant exhortation on innovation led the group to make concerted efforts to improve the innovation quotient of its businesses. And what we did, we said, innovation, we will look in a very holistic manner. And when we talk about innovation, it's not limited to product innovation, service innovation, or business model. Social innovation is, social application of innovation is very, very important for Tata Group because there is a belief, there is a value system that what comes from the people must go back to people many times over. And that's what one of the founders always used to say. And today, I will give you, I will leave 2-3 examples of social, share with you 2-3 examples of social application of innovation with you. As Mr. Tata was saying, that we believe that culture and environment comes first rather than processes. And why we said that? Because for 10 years, we worked very hard to create process centricity through Business Excellence Program. and we thought that we should not get into the shackle of process, and then process binds our thinking, limits our thinking. So we thought environment is first thing to fix and process will come later. Many people talk about first in the world innovation, but we said if we can't do that, we'll do something which is difficult to replicate. And all this we learned from innovation gurus of the world, and the first person who helped us to understand and to unravel the concepts of innovation was Professor Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School. So we started a forum at the group level called Tata Group Innovation Forum, and this forum has a charter to inspire, enable, and create a positive change in Tata companies for fostering innovation. This forum is led by one of the directors of the holding company, and a number of CEOs are the part of this forum. I also assist this forum in implementing its agenda. One of the things that we do in Tata Group is when we have to do something new, we go and see that. Seeing is believing. And we took a number of missions to see some of the most innovative companies of the world. And we came to US to look at Microsoft, HP, Intel, nanotechnologies, 3M, Raytheons. We went to Japan to look at companies like Hitachi. We looked at companies like Ito-En, the tea-making companies. We look at Olympus company. We look at Fujifilm company, and many, many other companies. And we said, what is that they do which can be brought to our group, which will change the DNA of the organization? And based on that, we initiated a few things which I'm going to share with you, and how these initiatives have triggered new innovation, which I'm going to share with you. First of all, what gets measured gets done. And the line managers felt that we must know how well are we doing on innovation. So we started a tool called Innometer, and this is modeled on Professor Julian Birkinshaw, who is from London School of Economics, on his model. And I believe that this has also been written in Harvard Business School articles. And this Innometer is like a thermometer, which you can stick in a company, which you can stick in a department or stick in a business, and it will give you an idea about how is the innovation culture, or how are the processes which we have to support innovation. And it measures the culture between two extremes. On one side, it is the constraining culture, where you can't think, where you are put in a straitjacket. On the other side, it is a chaotic culture. So it gives you an idea that how companies' directions are set, how companies have provide time to people, space to people to think differently, and it helps company to measure the innovation culture. On the other side, the tool helps companies to identify how good are they in idea generation, whether it is ideas from inside or cross-pollination, or ideas from outside. How good are these companies in terms of idea conversion, in terms of selection of idea, in terms of development of idea, and how good are these companies in terms of idea diffusion and commercialization of these ideas. So that's a very interesting tool which we are using, and this tool is very clearly, as you can see in this chart, that it has very clearly shown that we are still not up to the mark in the area of idea generation. Perhaps the focus on improvement has taken better of us, and the innovation is, we are not able to trigger high level innovation in the companies. So that is one of the observations we had. We started a program called Tata Innovista, And this is what we learned from thoughts from 3M and all that. And Tata Innovista is a program which was started with 3 objectives. The objective number 1 was celebrate successful innovation. And unless we bring successful innovation in the fore, we will not be able to share those innovations, share best practices, will not be able to recognize people, innovators who have done the good work. Secondly, we learned in our journey that risk-taking is very important for triggering innovation. And so we initiated another category called Dare to Try, to celebrate unsuccessful innovation. And people who fail, we bring them to a big program, we shake hands and we give them trophy. And not those people who are supposed to make donuts, and if they fail in making donuts, we don't recognize them. But if somebody fails because he or she has undertaken a big, bold experimentation, then that's celebrated. Third objective was to identify white space opportunities and identify what are the new opportunities which we can have, and we initiated leading edge category. And in the last 4-5 years, this has thrown up a number of projects. And I'm going to share with you one project, which is a project on social innovation. This is a case of a company in our group called Tata Chemicals, and this company operates in a very remote place in Gujarat. The problem was that Tata Chemicals, which is the second largest soda ash manufacturing producer in the world, 15,000 tons a day, they create a lot of solid waste, because for every ton of soda ash, you have to create 0.4 tons of solid waste. And this solid waste is very alkaline in nature, very saline in nature, because this is on the shores of an ocean. What we have realized that 12 soda ash companies across the world have been closed because of this waste generation. And for years, we have been dumping this waste, and for years, we have been grabbing land, good land, fertile land, and we have been spoiling the aesthetic of the whole place. So the challenge was, what do we do with that? Should we close the plant, or should we do something about it? And should we do something about people who are living close to that plant? And through the Tata Innovista program, this project was undertaken by a team of engineers. And what they observed, it was a year-long project, but in the sum and substance is, what they observed is that there are certain types of plants or grass which survive in a very, very difficult alkaline and saline environment, because there's something happens at the root of these plants. When it was studied, it was observed that a very special group of microorganisms found on these on their root system, which help plant and grass to extract nutrients even from a very difficult situations, and they survive and they face adversity. So this phenomena was studied, and this was replicated on that saline wasteland. And the wasteland looked like this. You can see it on the right-hand side of the picture. And we observed that we are able to grow plant in this wasteland. And within a few years, 22 out of 30-acre land has been made absolutely green. This was a lifeless dump of waste material, which is now lush green plantation, is habituating about 6 varieties of plants and 3 varieties of grass. 44,000 plants are growing there, and a whole chain of biodiversity exists today. ants, frogs, snakes, everything is there. And the whole community has lightened up because we have a whole big piece of land which was a wasteland, which is now this innovation has application in many areas in Tata Group, and through the process of Tata Innovista we have been able to understand what is happening in a small part of a Tata company and how it can be replicated to different parts of the world. There is another initiative that we have undertaken. What we realize that the culture of collaboration is extremely important for nurturing innovation, and the culture of collaboration was not as good as we would have liked to have. We realize that people do not source ideas, do not source solution to their problems outside their domain. Most of the people try to look at the solution within their domain. So we created a web-based, Web 2.0 based Tata Innoverse system, which is nothing but a social networking process. And very interestingly, what happens is Tata companies across the world suggest innovative ideas. They respond to innovation challenges thrown by the management, and they bet on the ideas and win karma points. They bet on the idea, they evaluate the idea, and through this process the good ideas move up in the value chain, and finally they are selected and they are operationalized. And this is a mechanism which is helping to sift through the ideas and identify great ideas for implementation. In order to make this culture of collaboration and really benefit from culture of collaboration, we started a process called InnoCluster, which is nothing but bringing technology. One thing we learned very clearly from 3M is that today innovations are not taking place in a particular technology. It is taking place at the intersection of two, three technologies. So we created a cluster on nanotechnologies, plastic composites, IT, water. We also created clusters with world-class companies like DuPont and Corning, and through this process we are identifying a number of challenges, and these challenges are converted into innovative products and services. And I want to share one more example with you, and this example is about a water purifier called Swachh. And Swachh is a Hindi word which means pure, and this is supposed to create pure water. And the challenge that we saw was that half of world's hospital beds are occupied by patients suffering from waterborne disease. We realized that 1.8 million children die every year from diarrhea, and 4,900, close to 5,000 deaths take place every year because of waterborne disease. When we looked at the Indian market, the household buying behavior, we realized that the penetration of TV is pretty high, 76 per thousand people, households. We realized that pressure cooker, which is a very popular cooking gadget in India, very high. We looked at bicycle, refrigerator, but when we came to water purifier, the penetration was very low, and people do not use water purification, probably because they are ignorant about this. They are ignorant about the effects of impure water. There is lack of motivation, and perhaps there is an issue of affordability also, because water purification in terms of priority comes much later. So the challenge that Mr. Tata left with the companies was to create affordable water purification system which will improve the quality of life. And 4 companies got together. TCS got together with Tata Chemicals and Titan, which is a watch manufacturing company. It came as a partner to develop the design for the product, and we had plastic technology we learned from another company. And in the last 1 year back, we launched this product called Swachh, which is right in front of you. And the cost of water purification is 0.2 cents per liter, which means for 2 cents, a family of 5 can drink pure water, which is very, very affordable for improving the quality of life in India. This is a new technology which has been used by using natural rice husk ash based system, and nanotechnology is used to create this water purifier. This has hit the market very successfully. The cost of this water purifier is $20. In $20, you can get 3,000 liters of water, and it will last you for several years. And then for few dollars, you can change the bulb, and then again it will run for a long time.
देखो पूजा,
What, पापा?
इस पानी में है बीमारी फैलाने वाले कीटाणु, लेकिन दिख नहीं रहे। ये देखो। चलो देखते हैं टाटा स्वच्छ नैनोटेक वाटर प्योरीफायर में इनका क्या होता है।
टाटा पेश करते हैं टाटा स्वच्छ नैनोटेक वाटर प्यूरिफायर। इसके आविष्कारी टाटा स्वच्छ बल्ब में है आधुनिक TSRF टेक्नोलॉजी, जिसके स्वच्छ रक्षक करें टाइफॉइड, कॉलेरा, डायरिया, डिसेंट्री जैसी बीमारी फैलाने वाले कीटाणुओं का नाश, और दे स्वच्छ पानी। ना उबालना, ना बिजली, ना नल का कनेक्शन, ना ही कोई हानिकारक केमिकल्स, और कीमत सिर्फ 999 रुपए।
वादा स्वच्छ पानी का,
विश्वास टाटा का।
टाटा स्वच्छ।
This is a short TV ad which is talking about the fact that this is a very technology-based product available for 999 rupees, which is close to $20, and it gives you absolutely pure water, which is good for your health. And finally, I would like to talk a little bit about this product called Nano, and I have my colleagues here, and I would invite them to talk more about it and clarify any questions that you may be having.
Today's story started some years ago when I observed families riding on two-wheelers. The father driving a scooter, his young kids standing in front of him, his wife sitting behind him holding a baby. And I asked myself whether one could conceive of a safe, affordable, all-weather form of transport for such a family. A vehicle that could be affordable and low cost enough to be within everyone's reach. A people's car, built to meet all safety standards, designed to meet or exceed emission norms, and be low in pollution and high in fuel efficiency.
And so there were 3 challenges which were given to the team, young minds, young people. 5 young people were given this challenge to produce a car at $2,500, which was not negotiable. The $2,500 was $2,500, and that was sacrosanct. And one day we asked Mr. Tata, how did you arrive at 2,500? And he said, I didn't arrive at that number. I was interviewed by some media people, and they said, this kind of low-cost car, what do you think should be the price? And he says, well, I'm not sure, but it should be much better than what is there in the market. So they said, do you think you can produce the car, or you can sell the car at 100,000 rupees, 1 lakh, or $2,500? And he said, well, maybe. And in his words, he says next day there was a newspaper, big headlines, Tata produces 1 lakh car. And he was saying, I had a choice to go back and say, no, I never said that, you put the words in my mouth, or accept the challenge and really do it, what we are expected to do. And he said, we chose the latter, we accepted the challenge, and we did it. And the point he was making, that if you want to innovate, and he said in those words, he said, if you want to innovate, take a bold challenge, make a public announcement. It will happen. But if you don't make a public announcement, if you keep it somewhere close to you, that innovation will be very difficult. So he says, make a public announcement and it will happen. So these 5 engineers were given this task, 2,500 non-negotiable. Car has to meet regulatory and safety requirements of the market where it has to be launched. And it has to give acceptable performance as per the customer requirement. So these were the 3 non-negotiable norms which were given. And the vehicle has been designed after doing lot of innovations. And I'm sure my colleagues can talk hours about that. But just to give you a quick idea that in engine technology, the whole engine management system is MPEFI for a 2-cylinder engine, which was not very common. And it is all aluminum engine. It is not a steel or an other metal engine. The fuel efficiency, because of the lightweight, has gone up by 2%. The accessory technology also is very, very different. There is alternator system which is efficient, the water and oil pumps which are much more efficient, which has improved the fuel efficiency. The weight reduction, a lot of work has been done on weight reduction of this car. And the best in class curb weight, I'm told, is about 600 kg, which is lowest for the entry level car in India. Aerodynamics also, a lot of innovation was done, and tire technology, a lot of innovation was done, and all this has resulted in a car which has the carbon emission of 103 grams per kilometer. And the existing competing products in India have emission of 130 to 150 maybe grams per kilometer. Fuel efficiency, this is 23, 24 kilometers per liter, means it's about 55 miles per gallon. 55 miles per gallon is the fuel efficiency. It has been designed by using very less number of fasteners, and I'll request after this my colleague will give you some more insight about that. It's tubeless tire, which everyone knows, and so on and so forth, a number of innovation. Not only the company has done, but the whole ecosystem has done. The steel supplier has done innovation. The part component suppliers have done innovation. The dealers have done innovation. The electronic partners for this product have made huge number of innovation to make the car at $2,500. And the journey was for 7 years. And in 2003, Mr. Ratan Tata had announced his vision in 2003 that we'll produce a car for $2,500. And in 2010, he said the promise is a promise. So we will still sell the car at $2,500. And these are some of the statistics, how the car was made, what were the difficulties. The biggest difficulty was disruption, I would say, was when the car plant had to move from Singur, which was in West Bengal, to Sanand, which is in Gujarat. And that was a huge disruption because company had already put in huge amount of money. Suppliers and partners had put in their plants, and everything had to move out from there. And finally, the journey was so interesting that it was decided to chronicle this journey, and it is not an internal book. The Small Wonder is a book, and I'm glad to say the author of the book is with us today. And Christabel, would you like to stand and take a bow? She has written this book. Which talks about the human side of innovation, not the technical part of innovation, but human side of innovation, that what makes people, ordinary people, do extraordinary things. What are the drivers of expanding capacity and capability in human beings who deliver extraordinary products or services? So that's it from my side. Thank you very, very much. And if you have any questions, I'll try my best to. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to invite Dean Venki Narayanamurthy up to join us for a minute, and let's have a little discussion briefly before we take questions from the audience. You see there's 2 microphones on either side. Venki, you're thinking a lot about energy technology innovation these days and how the innovation happens. You were, of course, started your career with Bell Laboratories and the sort of great age of American technology innovation in the information technology area. What do you think about India being a hub, a focal point for technology innovation in all over, but especially in the energy space going forward?
So first of all, I want to congratulate you for the success. And sometimes it's good to have a real stretch goal. And we always argue in this country between if you have stretch goals, whether it all should be bottoms up. And obviously bottoms up is very important. But one of the questions which I had really for you, and really thinking about this, because innovation is obviously extremely important. And often we have felt innovation has come top down from the Western world to other countries. What you're doing is something very different. And in the information technology arena, people talk very much about reverse innovation coming out of the third world. And so the strategy for Tata, what is your strategy where this now has really worldwide impact in terms of low cost, carbon, CO2 efficient vehicle technology? I mean, I think that's the open question, right? So I think we should. It's very exciting as far as I'm concerned that you're doing this.
Yeah. Tata companies are committed to produce low-cost vehicles, low-cost products and services, and the journey in this direction has already started. And as you would know that Tata Motors have launched electric car also in Scandinavia, in Norway, where we have a battery company, and there are work going on hybrid, especially in Jaguar Land Rover. A lot of work is going on in Jaguar Land Rover in reducing the footprint. At this point of time, it's very, very high for those cars, but they have made very bold and aggressive targets to reduce per kilometer emission from 212 to 130. So the company is committed to make investment in making sure that we remain green in whatever we do.
In your choice of materials, I noticed, for example, there's deep discussion to had. I agree with you, it's more the DNA and so on. You had asbestos for the brakes.
Right.
Yeah. Is that?
No, asbestos free.
Asbestos free. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's the asbestos free.
Free. Yes. Yes. So 10 years ago, even 5 or 6 years ago, when I would meet with visitors here from India, political leaders, one of the terms that kept coming up was technology transfer, when it would talk about energy innovation. There was a vision that was embraced that was somehow talking about technology investments in R&D in this country and in Europe, and that somehow what was really important was to facilitate transfer of technology from the post-industrial world to the rapidly developing countries. What's so interesting to me about Tata, and something that I always wondered about, was why they embraced this view. Because it seems like Tata has taken the exact opposite perspective, that in fact, if you're growing your economy at 10% per year, what better place for innovation than in that country than being dependent on US or European innovation? Actually, homegrown innovation would actually be world-class. And I think, frankly, right now, Tata, if you really can make this car cost-effective with safety and emissions regulations for the United States market, I think there's also, I think Ford and GM have something to worry about.
I think our aspirations point in two directions. One very important thing is to create products and services for improving quality of life of people in India. And that's frugal engineering. That is low-cost engineering. And that is the kind of engineering we believe that we have to do internally. And we believe that perhaps we will not get technologies from outside to do this kind of frugal engineering. Second thing is we also realize this fact that we are competing with the best in the world, whether we are working outside or whether we are in the Indian market. And for competing with the best in the world, we need technology transfer. We need the high-class technology from outside. So I think our strategy is both, and we are working in both directions. But what happens is, when you do high technology innovation, it doesn't get noticed because there are many people who are doing that. But when you do this frugal engineering innovation, then it gets noticed. For example, this water purifier, for example, our telecom company came up with a new concept, Docomo, teleservices Docomo, about billing per second, which was never heard of in the telecom industry. It was a game changer product. So these things get noticed, and I think we need to do balance of both.
Let's have a question over here from the audience. Could I have the first person there? If you could actually just briefly state your name and your affiliation, and then ask a brief question, please, because there are a number of people who.
Sure. My name is Sam White. I'm one of the co-founders of Promethean Power, a startup right down the street in Cambridge. I noticed that most of the focus was on products and technologies for people living in cities, and maybe the water purifier was the one that was focused on rural areas where most of the population is. How much of your innovation now is focused on rural communities? And just to give you an idea of why I'm asking this, our startup is 100% focused on developing a solar-powered refrigeration system specifically designed for dairy farmers in India to chill milk. And I'd be curious to know what your focus is in terms of rural development.
No, very valid point you have raised, and that is one area where we are very, very committed to. And I can share one innovation that we are trying to work out, we are trying to commercialize is we are trying to design a smokeless smokeless cooking, cooking range. In absence of another word, I'll say smokeless cooking range for rural people, for poor people, so that they can cook without polluting their environment and without making adverse impact on their health. So that is one innovation we are very keen about, and we are doing a lot of work with the help of Indian Institute of Science. And similar, in many areas, Tata companies are working with communities around them to innovate and help them make their lives better.
Next, please.
I'm Jeremy Moldaven from MIT Lincoln Laboratory. And first is a comment just sort of applauding you for having a focus on looking towards efficiency in manufacturing and having an attitude that looks towards innovation in the area of sort of conservation of energy and in the environment. Those are, I think, important things for companies to have as policies. The question I have is, how long do you think it'll take for your non-recurring engineering costs to be recouped when you've made this commitment to sell at this price point?
Can I invite my colleague?
In other words, what are the real economics under the hood?
Well, making money at, not a lot, making money at, when you get to quarter, you're a startup, all right? So when you're starting up and you made the first 50,000 units, automotive assembly plants aren't efficient until you really hit about 250,000 units a year. Any auto assembly plant around the world, the market's usually around 250,000. For this one, it's geared for 250 now, we go to 350 with some line balancing changes and so on. So, you know, it's when you get to that point, you're actually, you're not gonna make like $15,000 per unit like you do on a Ram pickup. So, that's all. But they're not in business to lose money either.
Yeah.
And then you've also got to look at moving people up the value chain as well, because you hit a lot of young families that couldn't formally afford, and all they could afford was say a motor scooter, less than $2,000. So this hits about a $2,000 to $2,500 sweet spot. Car, the least expensive car before that was $5,000 from Rudy 800. So you get them in, you move them up the value chain as they grow economically. And so you do it on a unit cost, yeah.
Like a loss leader?
I wouldn't call it a loss.
You know, the basic driver was very different. The basic driver was to provide safe mode of transport to people, to families who are today not adopting that source of transport. But obviously, companies will not do it at the cost of, you know, throwing good money after bad money. They will not do that. So there is, and I'm not the right person to answer this because I don't come from Tata Motors. But philosophically, I know that we are not there in the business of losing money. Obviously, you will make money, but that's not the driver for innovating this product. The driver was.
One last question, and then I'm going to let Venki have the final word.
My name's Nitin Malhotra, and I'm a grad student here. And recently I was in India, and I saw the Nano for the first time. And the way I see it is now the infrastructure has remained the same. I come from Bombay, and it's remained the same, but there are more cars. Can you throw some light on where
I was going to ask about traffic as well. That's a great question.
Right now, it's not even healthier to actually walk because of the pollution. So, can you
Don't
shed some-
worry, nanos will not make the road condition worse in Mumbai. That I can assure you.
Right.
Come after 5 years, you will not blame nano for making the traffic condition worse. You know, it's a nano. How many nanos are there? 350,000 per annum we are producing. And don't see it just from one dimension of, it will create congestion or what. See it from the point of view of 350,000 families who were not using safe mode of transport will be safe on the road. And that's a huge contribution. 350,000 people who aspired to acquire a four-wheel drive and who aspire to migrate from two-wheel to four-wheel will have a pride of owning four-wheel. And for that, if we have to pay a little cost, that's fine. And for 1.2 billion people, 350,000 nanos will not create so much of a problem.
Okay.
Will not make it worse.
I have one final question.
Yes,
It sort of goes back to Dan's original question, because you've sort of done very interesting innovation at a certain level. Tata's, for those who do not know the idea, historically, more than 100 years ago, the great-grandfather Ratan Tata started the Institute of Fundamental Research, etc. So they had a view, the long-term view, which is all very good. But in the United States, even today, or worldwide, if you look at German companies, there's also been large corporate laboratories which have been important. And so what is your strategy? Ultimately, you've got Tata Chemicals in terms of corporate laboratories which are part of the innovation system. So that has to fit in somehow.
Yeah. The view on this is that, we see these corporate laboratories in Japan, for example.
Yes.
Every Japanese company has a corporate laboratory.
And Germany for years.
And
had
Germany for years
tremendous.
has been. Our view has been a little different on this because Tata companies are independent, autonomous, board-run companies. And so Mr. Tata believes that each of these companies should have their own research organization. And we are not at this point of thinking of creating any corporate R&D center for Tatas. And if we have to do, we'll work through other R&D centers like Indian Institute of Science is something which was created by Tatas in 1917. And we are working very closely with them. We are working very closely with many universities in USA and UK and in India, IITs and all. And individual companies are investing in corporate laboratories. For example, Tata Chemicals has invested heavily in creating an innovation center, and they are working on biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, and they are serving other group companies also. But thought is not there to have a corporate level at this point of time.
Okay, well, I think we're definitely used our time very well. I think the real experiment is going to be in the future in terms of watching how the nano affects the transportation system, what other companies try to imitate and compete with Tata. And to me, a big question is whether other countries begin to embrace and open up a demand for products like the nano that you've really
In Asia
pushed to the
alone,
forefront.
right? In Vietnam and
all over Southeast Asia and even in
Southeast
China.
Asia. Highly populated countries.
That's right. So we'll look forward to watching that progress, and thank you again for joining us. Please join me in thanking again.